Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. And it's an honor to be here and present to the NCI team and as part of the TMT efforts. Let me go ahead and switch over to my presentation here. I want to confirm that everybody can see. Good? Good. Well, again, thank you. Digital transformation is a topic that is on a lot of folks' mind, and we really see this as a fairly profound transformation. And I wanted to do a couple things today. I wanted to talk about the big shift that we're seeing digital transformation create in terms of a shift in business models from buying to accessing, subscribing. But we want to spend more time talking about some of the implications of that, right? And give really the folks on this webinar a sense of what some of the best companies in the world are doing and the implications of how they're changing their business and how they go to market, how they innovate, how they think about pricing and packaging. And so that's what we'd love to be able to accomplish in the next half hour or so. But just starting really from the top, we really see digital transformation as creating a fairly massive shift. And when we say massive, this is a once-in-a-century shift that we're seeing going on in business models. When we sort of pull back and look at the arc of history, we see the 20th century as a century that's dominated by a paradigm of product sales, right? Really starting with the early 20th century with mass production and assembly lines, right? The focus of business has been really how do we produce and ship more and more units of a product, right? More cars, more laptops, more pens. And that's how we use mass production and technology to drive down our cost per unit. And competition was basically going to be based on how do we have the lowest cost per unit against perhaps the highest, price per unit. And the marginal cost between those two things is really the basis of competition in the 20th century. And we're starting to see this shift, right? Because today we don't just live in a product world, we live in a digital world. Companies are talking about digital transformation, digital disruption. The phrase digital disruption evokes massive industries that are being reshaped by new technologies. And when you look at the statistics and you see that half the Fortune 500 companies have disappeared in the last 15 years. And so out of all the Fortune 500 companies that existed 15 years ago, only half of them continue to exist. You can see the impact that exists today of digital technology. But when you really focus instead on what are the best companies, right? What are the best companies that have not been disrupted? What are the best companies that are busy disrupting themselves and disrupting their own industries? You look at companies like, say, General Electric, that used to be known as a product company, right? There are companies that sold light bulbs, sold appliances. But what do they call themselves today? They don't call themselves a product company anymore. They're saying we are a digital company. Now, we're also an industrial company, but more and more we're a digital company that also happens to be an industrial company. And you look at the advertisements they're doing, they're trying to attract developers, right? Their ads are now recruiting ads to attract a developer community because they're saying in the future, we need to be a digital company, a digital services company, and the workforce that we have in the future is still inventing new products, new technologies, but more and more software and a developer's and engineering mindset is important to what we do. You're seeing the same thing at IBM, right? Where IBM used to be known as a computer company. They sell computers, hardware, PCs, mainframes, mini computers. But today, what do they call themselves? Right? They're saying we sell cognitive data services. Right? We sell services, and our unique thing is about cognitive data services. And what exactly is a cognitive data service? They're doing commercials with Bob Dylan, with doctors, right, with kids interacting with this Watson service, then that is being used not as a product, but more as it being consumed as a service in themselves. And so what you're seeing is the best companies in this world are now reframing, reinventing themselves, transforming themselves away from products to these new digital services. When you look at some of the new entrants to the Fortune 500, these fast-growing companies, whether it's Amazon, Google, Facebook, Salesforce, or Apple, what makes them so special? Well, they don't necessarily see themselves as product companies as well, right? Amazon will say we are first and foremost a customer company. Yes, we sell billions and billions of dollars of product, but we see ourselves as a customer company, and the indicator of that is this thing we call the Amazon ID, right? Where every transaction that you ever do with Amazon is tracked back to your Amazon ID. You can log into Amazon, and you can actually see every single order that you've done with Amazon, including the first one you've ever purchased. So you can see everything is related back to this Amazon ID. Well, compare that to Amazon's number one competitor today, which is Walmart. And in the U.S., 100 million people will walk into Walmart every 2 to 3 weeks to buy something, which is, it's a third of the U.S. population. It's a massive scale. But none of this is tracked back to who you are, right? It's just simple product sales that are purchased by anonymous demographic. People walk into the store, they buy something, they check out at the counter, right? And so Amazon is able to take their relationship with you, which is a defined, known relationship anchored back to the Amazon ID, and they're able to take it in all sorts of places. They can start selling you groceries. They can start streaming your movies, right? They can go in all these different places where they can put appliances, right, like an Echo in your room and engage with you in all these different ways. Well, Walmart doesn't have that history, and so they're always going to be a retailer versus a platform company that can go in different directions. Same is true with Google. Same is true with Apple. Every day that passes, it matters less how many iPhones and iPads they ship. It is more about, well, how do we monetize our Apple ID relationships? We can sell you cloud services. We can sell you photos. We can sell you music. We can do all sorts of things with you. And so more and more, you're seeing your personal life is being run by these IDs that you have, whether it's a Facebook ID, a Google ID, a Salesforce ID. And this is the pattern that these newest companies are doing, yet you're not walking around with a Nike ID. You're not walking around with a Coke ID. You're not walking around with an Estee Lauder IDs. And these things are going to become more and more important. Well, how about some of the up-and-comers, right? These companies that are not necessarily even listed on the stock exchange yet, they're taking this idea to the next level where they have IDs on both sides of the transactions, right? They have the buyers and the sellers, and they can create marketplaces, whether it's for transportation services or real estate services or music services. They're able to create, both sides of the equation to create these marketplaces and take it even to the next level. And so what we're finding is, if you look at what's going on in the marketplace, we talk about this idea of a subscription economy. And what we mean by that is not, hey, instead of selling a product, why don't you let people rent it for $10 a month or $100 a month? We're talking about this idea that instead of viewing the customer as an endpoint for a product sale, view your customers as people that are engaged with you on an ongoing basis, that are subscribing to whatever it is, the value proposition that you have. You know who they are. You can track their usage and consumption patterns, and you can use that relationship as an anchor to go into all sorts of places. And when we see what's going on in the world, this is what we see, right? No matter where you are, if you read a headline, you can see people are moving more towards these subscription-style services, right? There's unlimited flight services. Uber is testing a subscription service. Apple is moving more and more into subscription services. This whole idea of an ongoing relationship with customer becomes really, really important. We do see this as a global phenomenon. No matter where we go in the world, the statistics are the same. 50% of the people in France are moving away from traditional ownership, and according to IFOP, 80% of German companies are saying they're dealing with subscription business models today, according to IDG, right? According to YouGov, 78% of the people in the UK subscribe to at least one product or service. And so this is becoming a pervasive part of our lives. If you think about your own personal life, more and more of your personal life, whether it's entertainment, whether it's pet food, whether it's health, whether it's travel, whether it's home automation, all these things, where there's news, all these things are being fulfilled by services that you're subscribing to, where you don't have to go and buy individual movies, right? You don't have to go and buy individual newspapers. This is what's happening today. It's also happening in our professional life, right? Every day that passes, more and more of our business life is being fulfilled by these services that we subscribe to. When we take a look and we say, well, subscription businesses, how fast are they growing? We actually find that they're growing 9 times faster than traditional businesses. And so this graph is showing the revenue growth on an index basis, right, index to 100, of our customer base and the subscription services that they offer over the last few years compared to the revenue growth on a quarter-by-quarter basis of the S&P 500, you're seeing it's a 9x difference. And if you just look at the folks on the phone that are in the software industry, you're seeing this in the software industry itself, where software as a service companies are growing at 30 to 40% a year, right? While perpetual license revenues are growing at 3 to 4% a year. Oftentimes, even in the same company, if you look at Oracle, the cloud revenues are going up, but the perpetual licenses revenues are fairly flat over a year-to-year basis. So you see that 10x difference in the technology sector, but when we pull back, we see this across all sectors, right? Connected car services will be a $1.5 trillion business over the next 15 years, while car sales are going to be relatively flat between now and 2030. And so when we engage with companies that are talking about digital transformation, this is what they're realizing. They're realizing digital transformation is not just about using digital technologies to improve what you're currently doing. Digital transformation is about rethinking your entire business as a business anchored on the customer, where you're viewing the customer as a subscriber. It's a whole new way of thinking, where the traditional way of thinking, the 20th century way of thinking, is to start with a product. Let me create a hit product. Let me create the next great car. Let me create an iPad, an iPhone, whatever, a new drug, whatever it happens to be, and let me feed that hit product across as many channels as I can, right? Maybe it's a new movie from Hollywood, and I have a DVD channel, I have a movie channel, I have a streaming channel. But I'm feeding this product into as many channels as I can, ultimately to be consumed on a one-off basis by a customer, sometimes who is even anonymous. I don't know who the end customer is. I've got a multi-channel distribution network where I know somebody is buying on the other side, but I don't know who they are. I don't have a relationship with them. To say, let's view it very differently. Let's start with the customer. Let's view them as a subscriber. Let's have a relationship with them. Let's know who they are. Let's understand all the different places they're spending time. They're spending time in the retail store. They're spending time on the phone. They're spending time on their digital devices, interacting. And wherever they are, let me make sure they're accessing my innovations, products and services in a way that extends my value to them, is anchored around the value proposition of the brand that I offer. And this is a completely different way of thinking. But when you can think this way, there's all sorts of ways that you can transform your company and all sorts of places where you can take your business. Now, what does it take? Just to show the extent of this thinking. When companies think like this, they're finding a few things. The first thing they're finding is that this whole idea of a subscriber identity record, right? And we evoke that with the Amazon ID, the Google ID, the Facebook ID. Every company in the world that wants to do this will want to establish some relationship with you, right? A Nike ID, a Coke ID, whatever it happens to be, right? And this could be work in a consumer context, but it can also work in a B2B context. And then instead of having just a light CRM record, they're starting to fill out the subscriber record with all the information we know about the subscriber. So as an example, on a retail basis, we were talking to a major retailer that's starting to do a good job of actually identifying a person when they walk into the store, right, with iBeacon and other technologies to say, well, we know who you are, and we can actually link you to your online record. But what they found is, well, this customer is only walking into our retail store 2 times, 3 times, maybe 4 times a year. And they don't know enough about that customer. And so now they want to launch home automation services, health services, all these things so they can actually, over time, build a rich history of every one of their customers so they can deepen engagement and go to different places and find new revenue streams. So this whole idea of reinventing your business to start with a subscriber ID is simply a follow-through of this picture here we saw before of wanting to run a business that looks like the business on the right versus the business on the left. Now, continuing that line of thinking, a lot of times companies will then say, gosh, this opens up a whole new world of possibilities. When Adobe switched from selling Creative Cloud, right, or Creative Suite as a software box and shifted to Creative Cloud, they said, well, we didn't just change our revenue model. We were able to say, let's start with the customer and let's re-envision all these different things that we can do. So part of your Creative Cloud subscriptions, you get access to not just the Creative Cloud technology, but a place where you can actually, a social network where you can engage with other designers to swap projects, a Shutterstock-like offering where you can actually click, upload your graphics and sell it online in a marketplace. Caterpillar is saying the same thing, where when we engage with Caterpillar, this isn't about selling tractors or engines as a service, right? Where you don't have to buy the tractor, you can subscribe to metric tons of earth moved, and Caterpillar will get there. But they're saying, you know what? We've actually have all our physical assets on the marketplace now, up to 2 million of these things that are all internet enabled and centered up. And so they're collecting all sorts of data about the devices. If it's engines, how much vibration is going on? How often are they being used, right? And how many hours have they been used over since the last maintenance period? And this data, they're saying, gosh, there's all these revenue opportunities for us now, where in addition to the $50 billion we currently make selling tractors and engines and physical devices, we can see $1, $3, $5, $10 billion of new revenue opportunities around things like predictive maintenance, around things like entire farm management systems where the tractors are self-driving. And this might be a few years out, but they can see all this coming. And so when you're able to rethink what you do from the customer on in and use digital technologies, it usually opens up enormous new possibilities of revenue. Now, how do you tap into some of these things? Well, the way you innovate when you start with a subscriber record is very different, because you can now engage the customer and engage the information you collect from the customer back into your innovation. So innovation is no longer about taking 1, 2, 3 years to create a hit product and launch it into the marketplace, the brand new car, the brand new iPad, the brand new laptop, if you will, right? Innovation often becomes an agile, iterative process. A great example of this is a company called Grace. It's a subscription snack offering where you pay them some weekly or monthly fee, and every week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they send you a box that looks like this with 4 or 5 snacks. And the amazing thing about this is they have built an agile factory, because what do? 24 hours after you get your box, you get an email saying, well, what did you like? Okay, and looking at this picture, well, I like the popcorn, I like the apple and cinnamon flapjack. I'm not sure about the Rocket Casbah thing, right? I'm not really into dried fruit, but I like the peanut cookies, right? Give me more of those. And they'll feed all that information back into their system and make sure that you get a different box in 1, 2, 3 weeks based on your preferences. And so in order to do this, their agile factory actually customizes every single box coming off the line to that specific customer. They can actually control their agile factory from their phone, and they can actually say, okay, let's feed different things in. And so, which is pretty amazing. Now, when they started, the company that started in the UK, and a year or two ago, they said, it's time for us to go into the US market. And a typical CPG company would have spent millions of dollars basically analyzing the preferences of the target market they're going into. And by and large, they get it right about 50% of the time, right? Well, Grace says, we're not going to do any of that. We're just going to take our UK inventory. We're going to add some ideas that we have of what the US, market would like, and we're just going to feed it into the system. And so boxes started being sent out. People would start ranking, says, I like this, I don't like this. Their story is the chutney, which is big in the UK, started going down in the US, right? In the US marketplace, they didn't like that taste as much. Barbecue started going up. And over the course of 3, 4, 5 months, they were able to peg the US market taste exactly the way they need it. Again, by incorporating customer feedback back into the innovation process, back into the agile process, right? Which is pretty amazing. And you've seen the technology companies do that today, where they launch a beta product. And what does that mean? That means we want to get a product into the marketplace quickly, gather customer feedback, iterate our innovation very quickly based on that, right? And that's how we nail the product to the target market versus doing a big research, 1.5-year life cycle, and hope that you got that product right when you finally release it into the marketplace, right? So an agile approach to innovation is really where you can really take advantage of these customer-centric business models. Marketing winds up being very, very different as well, because when your goal is to get the customer to buy a product under this asset transfer model where you bought the product, it is now yours. I invest in marketing to create a brand, to give you a brand association of what that, what the use of that, what that purchase product would feel like after you purchased it. Well, when it's an iterative subscription service that you can experience, then your goal is actually to get the customer to experience the product first. And so here's an example of Clear, which is a subscription service that gets you to bypass the security lines at the airports, and primarily in the U.S., and this has been a big hit. Well, you know, they used to use a brand to tell you what it is. They would ship you the product, which was a card. You would get the card, and then 2 weeks later, you know, maybe you get to use it in your next airport trip. And they said, this doesn't make any sense. This is you can't really experience what it is. And so what they did was, let's get rid of the card. Let's replace it with fingerprinting systems. And now you can actually sign up and experience Clear right there and right then and there. So what do? They wait till the lines are long in the security channel. They have salespeople at the airports approach people at the lines and saying, gosh, you know, this looks like it's a 30-minute line. If you sign up for Clear right now, we'll give you maybe a 30-day trial. You can actually walk right through. And so getting customers to experience what your value proposition is becomes much, much more important than trying to, you know, convey a brand association. It's not that brands are not important, right? Brands, value proposition, core, those things are really, really important. But more and more, that brand is communicated through the experience itself versus simply through an advertising campaign to get companies to actually make a purchase. Very B2C centric. Well, how about the B2B businesses, right? Where it's more sales oriented versus marketing oriented. What we're finding is the whole concept of sales, whether it's a direct sale or a channel sale, has to change as well. Because in the old model, when you're selling products prior to digital transformation, well, your path to growth is about selling more units, right? Or you lower your per unit costs, or you find some way of increasing prices. But in this new world where you have customers, more customer value, not unit sales, you have a different set of three things. You can acquire more customers, you can lower the churn of your customers, right? Keep them engaged longer, or you increase the value for customers. And so salespeople, instead of being trained on feature functionality of the products, your lead salespeople have to spend a lot of time understanding the customer. They pour through their S1s or their 10Ks. They pour through their public announcements. They understand what are the strategic initiatives of the customers, and then they source product expertise across their portfolio of products across the entire company to create a customized value proposition for that customer, whether it's bringing the new customer on board as a first-time account, whether it's deepening the relationship and increasing the spend the customer is willing to take with the vendor, right? Or holding on to customers and making sure they're not going away to competitors and decreasing the value that they're actually spending with the account, right? So account-based sales and customer-centric sales become much, much more important in this new world. And so we talked about innovation, we talked about marketing, we talked about sales. Well, finance actually is completely transformed in this new world as well. And so the old financial model looks at the income statement and says, gosh, you know, how do I cost account for this unit of sale? How much of the unit of sale went to cost of goods sold? How much of it went to R&D? How much of it was spent on G&A? How much of it was spent on sales and marketing? And how much of this was fixed cost versus variable cost? And given my unit sales, I'm able to drive down my marginal cost across all these different things. Well, the new model has a whole different set of metrics. What is the cost to acquire a customer? What is the long-term value for the customer? What is contracted and what is the potential? What is my annual recurring revenue that I can count on, that I can bank on to drive future investments? And what is my average revenue per customer, right, per user, if you will, not just my average, you know, revenue margin on a product basis. And when you look at this and you say, gosh, you know, there's a whole business model transformation going on here. And you look at what part of a company, the company really needs to own that business model transformation. You land at the finance department, right? Because they're the ones that see all the data. They're the ones that need to go to the street and explain, okay, here's what our unit economics look like. Here's what our cost of customer acquisition. Here's why we can spend $300,000 on a customer because it's worth $3 million to us over time. And more, finance has to take on the role of architecting the fundamental business model of the company in this new world, and not just focus on how do I track costs and how do I account for the cost back to the unit sales. As an example, in the video streaming business, Netflix is spending $5 billion, and this is about 12 months ago, there's probably up to $6 billion. They spend $5 to $6 billion a year on original content. And the other players at Amazon, just this week, are spending, I think, $40 million to stream NFL Thursday night games, and they're spending 4 times more than the last vendor, which was Twitter, for the same right to stream all this content. Well, why can these companies spend so much? And these other players, HBO and these other publishers, are saying, gosh, this is an unfair advantage. It doesn't make any sense. Well, why does it make sense? Because if you think about it, Netflix has 70 million subscribers today. If you just average $100 a year, they're able to generate $7 billion of revenue from a known customer base with known churn characteristics. So they can bank on $7 billion of revenue this year and next year. They don't have to play the Hollywood blockbuster game where you invest $100 million and maybe this movie will make $150 million, or maybe it'll be a bust and only make 20. But they're saying we have $7 billion of recurring revenue, and our cost, from a cost of goods sold, from a G&A, from an R&D standpoint, aren't that high. We're only spending about $1.5 billion on costs to serve these $70 billion. So we're going to take the other $5 billion and we're going to invest it in content acquisition, because content production, because that's what we see as our tool to acquire future customers. This is what we're going to do for international expansion. This is what we're going to do to hold on to their customers. It's because they have so many subscribers and they have a known revenue stream that they can bank on, they're able to construct a much different business model than the traditional Hollywood business model, which is it's spend money on a movie, and maybe it's going to work, and maybe it's not going to work. Plus, on top of that, they have all this data. And so when they commissioned House of Cards, they knew from their 10, 15, 20 years of historical data, going back to their DVD business, that their customer base would like a movie about politics, right? You know, with Kevin Spacey as the lead. They actually knew they can go fine tune and know that their bet on this content is probably going to pay out because of all their historical data. So we talked about marketing, sales, finance. We talked about innovation and how product development actually works. When we talk to CEOs, what they talk about in part of digital transformation is this whole idea of changing the culture of the company. And so when the culture of the company used to be hit product driven, right, then the assembly line of how you do that. Marketing goes out there and figures out what is the product that we need to create. Manufacturing goes and figures out how to create that product with the highest quality and the cheapest cost. Sales goes, figures out, and sells as much of many of the product as possible. Finance tracks it, so you have a fairly siloed organization. But when you're having this agile, dynamic, customer-centric, where you engage with the customer, you communicate with the customer, you have to break down the functional silos, if you will, and wrap all the different functions behind the customer, right? Because you have a whole set of product portfolio, but there needs to be a tip of the spear that engages with a specific customer, either from a one-on-one marketing standpoint or a direct sales account management standpoint. And then you've got to line the whole organization up. And so this whole idea of changing the culture of the company to focus on the customer, to be agile, to be iterative, to be able to break down functional silos, to be able to come together as a cross-functional team on a customer-by-customer basis, this becomes one of the most important things of transforming these organizations to really work in this new environment. Pricing and packaging becomes really important as well. And so as an example, you looked at all these examples. Well, finance, right? The idea of actually constructing the business model architect has a big, big dependency on how you want to price and package. How do I price my package so that marketing can get customers in the door and experience the brand? Sales has the right tools to construct the right value for the customer, right? And build a high margin business. Finance can look at this at a macro level and say, we're building a healthy business model with the right characteristics from a cost of customer and a customer lifetime value standpoint. So pricing and packaging becomes really core to any company's ability to construct this thing. I mean, just looking at Ford, right? When Ford is saying, look, we know that the future is not going to be selling more and more cars. The amount of cars we're going to be selling in 2030 is not going to be that different than the number of cars that we're selling now. Right? Because every day that passes, the need to own a car is starting to be reduced with all these transportation services, whether it's Uber, whether it's SNCF, whether it's bike sharing programs. You can go to Shanghai now, and there's bicycles littering the whole street where you can pick up a bike it to where you want, and then drop it off, all using your phone. Right? And so there's so many transportation options right now. But as a transportation brand with a connected car, right, there's something about that Ford knows is going to exist. McKinsey is saying, well, car sales might not increase, but there's $1.5 trillion we estimate of connected car services that will be produced between now and 2030. But how do we know what it is? And so the idea of having an app that you download to construct a Ford Pass ID, to have your credit card on file, to have the basic usage, the free usage of the app to be simple things like I can locate my car, I can start the engine while I'm remote, I can unlock the door if I can't find my keys. Right? These are all basic things that people want to download the app for, but now I've got a relationship with them. And now I can iterate, I can try different things. Gosh, if you're in the app and you're driving around, perhaps I can help you book a parking spot in the location you're driving to. Perhaps I can sell you Netflix so you can start streaming videos to the backseat for your kids, right? So that be able to anchor on a relationship and iterate on pricing and packaging over time and to try all these different things out, to have an experimentation platform, this becomes really, really critical for all these businesses to build the right service, build the right solution, and to build the right business model for their customers. The last thing I'll say is the systems. The systems all have to change as well. The traditional system, the traditional IT architecture simplified down looks something like this, right? Companies have invested in a CRM application to have all their customer data and to drive their sales, marketing, and customer service. They have an ERP application, and then they connect it with a whole series of modules, if you will, independent applications in a linear model. Because the goal was simply, hey, a customer wants 5,000 units of this widget, great. I'll go ahead and issue the quote, I'll book the order, I'll fulfill it, I'll invoice for it, I'll collect for it. It's a linear process to take that transaction through the system. And oh, by the way, most companies will have not just one linear system, they'll have upwards of 40 different versions of these things because they build different linear systems for different products, different segments, and different channels. I'll build an e-commerce channel here, I'll build a retail channel here, I'll build a direct sales channel here. Gosh, I acquired a company, I'll leave them on their system. I'm going into Japan, maybe I'll build a separate system just for the Japanese market, right? I'll have different versions of this system. Well, companies are realizing that all worked great when the goal was to ship products to a customer through a channel. But in this new dynamic customer-centric things, what they're finding is, gosh, I can't do what I need to do. When I need to change pricing, there's 42 different systems that the product price actually sits in. And I can't even design that price the way, I can't do consumption-based pricing. I can't do all these different ways of pricing that I know our customers will want in this new service-oriented type of economy. Or they're saying, I can't view the life cycle of a customer. They started with this, they added this, they upgraded to this, they consumed that. I can't see that because it's spread out across all these different systems. I'm still focused on orders. So if I want to do a usage-based consumption pricing model where my system needs to react to customer events, well, what is a customer event? They sign up, they upgraded, their free trial ran out, 2 days passed, they hit their monthly billing cycle, they actually hit their usage threshold and they're moving to a new tier. I can't process these events because my old system here doesn't have this concept of these different types of events, right? Payments become a problem. Being able to see financials over time. So I know I've got $20,000 sitting in deferred revenue, but how does that revenue spread over time so I can forecast what my revenues look like next month, next quarter, next year, right? And I don't have any financial metrics in this picture. How do I look at churn? How do I look at renewal? How do I understand what the recurring value is for my customers? You can't see these things. And so companies are moving to something very, very different, right? And this is why we exist. This is why we're engaged in these conversations, which is they're putting something in the middle. And for those people on the phone from the telecom industry, this looks like a telecom systems architecture where you have what the telecom industry calls a BSS OSS system in the middle, driving the innovations and the agility and the pricing and packaging ideas that you have as a company. And then you tack on the CRM system in the front, and you tack on the financial system in the back. But the capabilities of the system in the middle, a dynamic pricing engine, a subscription order management engine, an event-driven rating and billing engine. These are the capabilities that enable this type of business model to really thrive. It enables companies to test things, to try things, to launch new ideas, to get the feedback, to deepen the relationship, and to be successful in this new subscription-based business model. The last thing I'll say here is, if you like some of this content, we try to take each of these concepts and go deep with these concepts. We have it really in two forms. We have it in our online community at www.subscribe.com, or if you just Google Subscribe Academy, you're going to see a lot of this content that you see on the screen. We also publish it in print form in a magazine. And we also have local events across the world. So if you come to our website or you look for Subscribed, we have a big event in San Francisco in June. We have local events around the world where we bring companies together to talk about digital transformation, to talk about what the future is like, to talk about some of these best practices for succeeding in a digital world. And so with that, I'll stop here and take questions.